Welcome to the Self-Reflections podcast, where real reflections are shared by real people. Today's guest is Sheila Kamuda from Chicago in the US. Sheila, welcome to the Self-Reflections podcast. Before we dive into your journey, can you please share a little bit about yourself and what led you to the work that you do today?
Yes, I will. And thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I just wanted to mention that first. It's so great to be able to show up for your listeners and your community. And my journey actually started when my husband passed away. I was always working all my life. I worked as a project manager, and I always in creative industries. But my husband, he was older than me, and he became ill, and he passed away. So I knew that he wasn't well. So I had an indication, but the healing journey is something that we're just never prepared for, ever. And we all go through it differently. And I learned so much from that. And so that was November 2012 when he passed away. And I would say it took me, I always say it's about 6 years that I started to finally feel okay. And it took that long.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some
rightly
people
so.
go through it longer. Yeah, some people even go through it longer. And every day you think, every day it's sort of like you don't even know if the next day you're going to feel good. You have no idea. You just get through a day. I would remember that at 5 o'clock, would come around every day, and I'm like, oh, I made it till 5 p.m. I made it. And then the next day, I would wake up the same, no difference. I made it. And then after a year, I made it after a year, and I thought, okay, this is never going to end.
Yeah. Sheila, grief is often misunderstood. In psychology, we recognize grief as more than just sadness. It can evoke shock, guilt, anger, even relief at times. Can you share what grief looked like for you in those early days?
Well, for me, and of course we had, our kid was 15 when Bob passed away. So a lot of my feelings and emotions, it always goes on the child, especially a teenager. Teenager, those years are never easy anyway. And so I felt, it's interesting, I felt such a love for my husband. And I had decided when he was ill, a decision I had made was he would be at home. He would be kept home. I didn't care what was happening. He was going to be home because I thought it has to be so scary to be alone, let's say in a hospital or somewhere. So for me, the grief journey was just sort of this giant hole in my heart, because I felt like I lost like a best friend.
Of course.
I lost a husband. I lost the father of my child. And I somehow lost myself in all of that.
Completely.
So the grief is so huge. It's not just one thing. There's so many pieces to it, which we don't even know until we're going through it. And I never lost, I think it's because I had to do so much for my child, for Sydney, that you have to keep going. I mean, not everybody does. I could have made a choice to not keep going. I could have made a choice to be upset or feel like a victim or things like that, which isn't really my personality, but you just keep going. And I wasn't really angry. I was worried. I would say worry was the biggest thing that I was going through because of medical bills and things like that. That was that was the hardest part for me. And being alone, we were living in Seattle. So I'm originally from New York. Bob's originally from Chicago. I moved to Chicago, and we spent some beautiful years there. And because of work issues, we moved to Seattle, got married, had Sydney. So there was no family at all there. I had some friends. So it was this feeling of being alone, always being alone. And that's how grief, that's what I walk through every day, that I was alone. And today I have to get through whatever it is, plus go to work, plus make sure my kid graduates high school, all of it. So I wouldn't say it was anger. It was more worry, more stress, like that. Am I going to
Thank you
make
for
it?
sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. It's quite powerful when, we have such beautiful and raw stories on our podcast, and I do appreciate your vulnerability with us today, Sheila. Sheila, the 5 stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, are often referenced, but grief, as we know, is never linear. Many experience the back and forth between emotions rather than a clear progression. Did you find that to be true in your journey?
I I don't know that I did, to be honest with you. I was on such a track to move forward that I think that that is what helped me and motivated me to just keep going. I really didn't sit in any one place for very long. I just knew that I had to keep going and hoping that there would be something at the end of it. I don't know that I went back and forth. I wasn't depressed. I was just alone. I would just say I always felt alone. There was a feeling of being alone, not having really any help, having to do it on my own. That was the largest sense for me. And I kept calling myself a party of one, which is what I called the memoir I finally wrote 11 years after Bob passed away, because all I felt was like a party of one.
Mm-hmm.
That was the hardest part for me.
And I love that you've identified that because from what you've mentioned before, it's that loss of your person, and a part of you that you've grown to know because of that person also leaves you when that person does leave us. And when it comes to navigating what it feels like thereafter, the loneliness and the isolation that comes with that is really, really pivotal to highlight to our community for them to actually normalize that that's part of the process, and that it is also probably the hardest part of the process when you don't have those connections around you to help you through navigating grief and loss.
Very, very difficult. And I started to join a grief group. Sorry. And it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
People were very sad, very depressed. I'm not by nature. I get sad, but I try not to go there. I
Mm-hmm.
try to move forward, and I didn't find it that helpful. And I'm like, I'd almost rather. I mean, I kind of cut myself off that way too, but I felt like it was something I needed to do on my own. It's funny.
Mm-hmm.
I remember writing down one time that my relationship with Bob, we were very close. And so it's like even doing nothing with him was great. Even
Yeah.
just doing absolutely nothing. And I didn't even have that anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
And you touched on a really important point there, Sheila, that everyone's healing journey from grief is going to be different. There are going to be times where people fall into the trap of depression or denial or anger and they get stuck there for as long as they need. Others, they move through very, very quickly, and that's okay too. We want to normalize the fact that the grief journey is so unique to each person. No one's going to give you an exact framework of this is exactly what's going to happen and this is exactly how to move forward. And I really like that you touched on that point that there are going to be groups that really connect with what you need. And then there are going to be aspects of that that might not resonate. And that is beautifully okay.
and what I learned is, what I learned, because I'm looking for what is the lesson? What am I learning? What is the gift? If there is a gift, I learned that it's okay to go through my journey. It's okay to take my time. It's okay to not feel rushed. It's okay to not be okay quicker for somebody else. It's okay to be patient with myself. So I learned so many internal lessons that like worked well for me in my entire life through grief. Because of grief, I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to go through this my way, and nobody can do it for me, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody can prod you along. Nobody can really make you feel better. They can't make you feel better. They can help you, they can inspire you, they can, make you a cup of coffee, but they can't, you have to go through it yourself. And that is the journey, I think, is going through it yourself and not knowing what you're going to learn when you come out the other side. That's what I think the journey is.
Absolutely.
You're grieving, but you're sort of like, who am I when I get to that other side? Will I find me? And I remember going through it, and I was actually nervous about what I used to say, what is on the other side of grief? I'm actually scared about going there because I know what this is. I know what this is. I wake up every day. I'm scared. I know that. That's actually comfortable because I know it, which is crazy. I know that I'm scared. I know that I'm worried. I know that I'm alone. I'm not sure I want to know what's on the other side of grief, because then maybe I have to, I don't know, be well again or change. Is a very frightening thought to think, what is on the other side? And I'm not sure I want to go.
And the way that you described that really resonates with some of what my clients sometimes describe after experiencing loss is feeling that grief connects me to my person that I have lost, and that sometimes stagnates the process. Not to say that you're doing it on purpose, but there is a function that grief serves you. There's a comfort, even though it is really distressing and challenging to experience. It feels comfortable to be in that because it does connect you to the person that you have lost. And you're right, like we in any healing journey, we get comfortable with the uncomfortable in a really sometimes unhealthy way because it keeps us stuck. And when we then think of what's on the other side, that is more daunting to us because we don't know how we will cope there. Our coping mechanisms are, working beautifully in keeping us safe in what we are experiencing, but we don't know what that actually then is going to feel like. I love that you've mentioned that. Yeah.
It's
Okay.
really quite interesting, what we it's incredible looking back. It's like we learn, so we don't know it at the time. When we're going through it every day, we don't know it at the time, but afterwards we're like, wow, that was like all these things that were going through my mind, and how am I going to deal with this? And just being, and this is a new comfort zone, actually, knowing that I'm lonely and scared and worried and terrified and all of this, that becomes your comfort. And I can stay there. I know people who stay there, and it's very, very, because it's very scary. It is so frightening to take that step, to be like, what if I make it on the other side without my spouse, without my partner? That is a very frightening feeling.
And I love that you mentioned that because it brings me to my next kind of question I want to explore with you. We know that the nervous system can actually remain in that state of hyperarousal, that fight or flight, or sometimes for some people it might be the opposite. Rather than that fear and anxiety or that worry, it might go into more of a shutdown and numbness in like a hypoarousal. So many do struggle with regulating their emotions after a major loss that we know. Did you notice that in yourself, and what helped you through some of these overwhelming emotions that you're describing now?
Well, I always liked writing. I always journaled here and there. And I was starting to listen to, sort of start meditating, things like that. I was starting to go into that more spiritual world. And what I started to do, what helped me in particular, was I needed to communicate with Bob. And instead of just talking to myself out loud, I started to write letters to him every day. And it seemed to be an incredible coping mechanism. And I didn't think about it like, oh, I'm going to do this and it'll help me. I had no idea. I just wanted to talk to him. And it started out with, I paid a bill, or Sydney passed a test, or whatever it was. And then I actually, in 6 years, I wrote every day. And I actually wrote these letters in journals I had. So I actually filled 43 journals, and
Wow.
I just under 2,000 letters.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was really,
That's
when I look
powerful.
back, it was things like, hey, Bob, remember when you used to say this? Remember we used to laugh about this? Remember we went on that trip? Remember how silly that was? Remember when you played baseball? And it was just sort of, it was memories. It was telling him how Sydney was doing. It kept him alive for me. That was my coping mechanism. I'm not sure if that was healthy or not, but it worked for me.
Everyone that has ever listened to me in my clinic space on my podcast will state how much I'm constantly saying that reflecting, journaling is like number one, thing I would always recommend, because that in itself is such a beautiful way for us to externalize our struggles and our pain, be able to connect to people we have lost, and also be able to feel a connection to a deeper level of reflective practice for ourselves. So absolutely, it was probably a very, very therapeutic practice for you. And you obviously got something out of it, because otherwise you wouldn't continue doing it, right? So
Well,
I always say,
loved
if it
doing
works
it.
for you, keep doing it.
And it gave me something to do. It sort of filled my day.
Yeah.
It filled a portion of my day, or maybe I would do it every night. Whenever I would do it, even if I was I didn't take too many trips, but if I wasn't home, I would bring my journal with me. No matter what, I would have my journal with me. It was almost like, I wouldn't say a drug, but it was sort of like I was addicted to, I have to do this. It's like brushing your teeth. I have to write. And I always had something to write, and it was never forced. And I felt, it helped me cope. It was a way to communicate. It was a way to keep him close. It was a way for me to be sane. It was a way for me to have purpose. I had a purpose, something to do. I wasn't so completely alone when I had that with me. And I think that writing letters, because I've helped, I tell people, you should journal, just like you're saying, journal, but they don't know what to do. But the writing the letters was really easy, because I didn't have to think about it. It was like, oh my gosh, that bill, I finally paid that bill, or or whatever was all it was like the news of the day, or a memory, or things. Hello, Bob, remember when you used to say this? I was remembering you used to say that. I forgot. And now I remembered. It was so helpful to me. I didn't realize how helpful it was for 6 years.
Yeah, what you identified there, Sheila, is a purpose, right? You're right. Like journaling can be anything, or for anyone really. And the way that you were able to be specific in what it is that you were actually sharing, there was this, I want to communicate this to Bob. And that in itself was the function. And it then allowed the writing to flow. It sounds like so much easier, because there was a function and a purpose to what you were doing.
And if I was afraid of something, or annoyed at something, like I had found some medical bills buried underneath. It was quite quite a journey with paying bills, and I'm like, and so that helped too. It helped with a little bit of anger, a little bit of that kind of. It just helped this. I could let go in this piece of writing. It was really personal, and I was able to look back at it and realize how far I had come. Also. Because I realized what I started out was just, bits and pieces. And then I started to flow, and I started to have memories, and it evolved. It was sort of like an arc, it's like it started here, and then all of a sudden, and then something happened at 6 years. I would always pull my journal out to write a letter. And I was like, I don't really have anything more to say. And it stopped. Wow. It just organically stopped.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it. I'm like, I feel okay. It's very strange.
Yeah. And how was that for you? I know we're kind of skipping ahead, but like, how was that actually feeling for you? Something was so pivotal to your daily practice for it to then no longer be needed. How was that?
Well, something was happening holistically. So that was just I didn't need that cookie anymore. I just didn't need it. I felt like I didn't feel like I was betraying. I didn't feel like something was getting lost. Nothing like that. I felt peace, actually. It was like peaceful. I mean, I could always write again if I wanted. It was like nobody was telling me not to. It's my choice. I just felt like, it was like that. I could breathe. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I'm so glad that through your practice, you were able to get there in a really gentle way. I know that at times people often struggle knowing how to support a grieving person. And I know you mentioned that there was a lot of isolation. There was not a lot of people that you felt connected to at the time. So again, I'm going to ask the question, but I am mindful of your experience may have been different from others. In your experience, Sheila, what are some of the most meaningful things people did or things they said that actually did help?
Yeah. Well, I had some very good friends where I was working at the time. I had some very good friends, and two just, I love this when they said, we're coming over. We're going to that Italian restaurant. We're bringing food. What do you want? We'll be there in a half an hour. That happened. That was beautiful. It was just from the heart and beautiful. Another friend of mine, I remember on my birthday, it was the anniversary of Bob's passing, or mainly on my birthday, this one friend got three other friends together and said, okay, we're coming out. We're taking you out. It was acknowledging me is really what it was, because I knew I had to get there on my own, but people were gathering together for important moments in my life. They also several friends came to my kids' high school graduation. That was very meaningful. They didn't wait to be asked. They're like, when is it? We'll be there. So they just acknowledged me. And I think that's really the most important thing, because people can gather around you and they can bring food and they could do all of that. And I didn't have a lot of that, but the people that I did have, they were really mindful of me, and they really loved me. I mean, there was no choice about it. They just absolutely loved me. And I did have a memorial for Bob a month later after he passed away in this, he was very busy in the parks departments, and he was very community minded. And the place I wanted to have it in it was a heritage center or something that he was involved in. And they said, oh my God, yes, we're done. You just come do whatever you want. And I invited, people from whoever, people, and you can tell that people that knew him came. He was on baseball teams, and those people came, and my friends came. So it was this acknowledgement of me and of him, and this respect. So that's really how that came to be from me. It wasn't the day in and day out, I'll give you a call kind of thing, although people did. But after a while, people do get on with their lives. I believe that your friends get you to where you need to be, and they're there for you. And at a certain point, they must go back to their own lives, hoping that they've gotten you on your path so that you can make it the next bit of the way. And I believe that that's what my friends did for me.
Well, the way that you described that, it's just given me goosebumps, because so many individuals feel like there's this rejection or abandonment, that people stop caring. And it's not that they stop caring, it's exactly what you said. It's they can see that you are at a place that you are going to be okay. And that's not that they're not there or that they don't care. It's that you have enough strength to be able to then move into a place of asking for help or suggesting things where prior to that, that wasn't even something you were able to connect to.
They have to move on with their life. And it's important, because what they're basically doing without even knowing it, or maybe they know it, is, I realized later, that they can't stay with you. It's like you have to fly at some point on your own. You have to fly, you have to fall, you have to go and you have to fall. You have to sort of figure it out on your own. This is what we don't want to do. This is, I believe, a big problem. This is the part that people don't want to do. They want to stay there. They want people to come there. They don't want to move on their own. They don't realize that they have strength. And that is the one thing I learned through this. Oh my gosh, we have so much strength, but we don't know it. We don't know. We're so afraid of finding out how much strength we have, because we don't want to be alone.
On the flip side, Sheila, what are some of the well-intentioned things people may have said or did that actually may have not been helpful?
There wasn't very much of that. Also, I have a very strong person. I'm a New Yorker, so it takes a lot to upset me. So I'm sort of like, what, my attitude is very different. I'm not frail. Even in that situation, I'm very tough. And even if somebody did do something or say something, I don't know that I would have cared. I'm more like, I got this. I don't need you. That would be more mine. One person I know, very well-meaning, but there's always somebody that there's like, oh, how are you going to afford college for your kid? Like, there's always somebody that wants to pull you down somehow. And it does sting. But I'm sort of like, oh yeah, that's that person. They always do that. And in a way, it makes everything that happens makes you stronger. It's so cliche, I know, but it's really true. Everybody that's not really that helpful or not really that kind, although I did not run into that very much, but I didn't have a ton of people. I really don't. I don't have tons and tons of people. I had to select like 4 people in my life, 5 people in my life, not a lot. None. I mean, it's not like we got together that often, but the people that were there, they were just there. And then when I was on my own, I also, being in Seattle, okay, I'm not a driver because I grew up in New York. My husband drove. So I drove like a little bit, but then when he was getting ill and all that, I had to really learn how to drive. I had to take lessons again. I never went on a highway. I mean, I don't know how I made it to the grocery and back. So even that, it's like at some point, even that, your friends, they'll just do so much. They can't live your life for you. So they are kind, but at a certain point, you have to learn. You just have to learn as if like you're a child again, and you have to learn how to just be without another human. And I knew the time would come. It's so interesting. I knew it wasn't there then, but I knew, I said, I'll bet you, I would talk to myself. I would say, I'll bet you, Sheila, that at some point you're going to enjoy the quiet in the house, that you don't have to worry about anybody else. I mean, Bob and I got along great, but it's like no one what do you want to watch on TV? Nothing. You're going to enjoy that sense of freedom or, it took a long time for that to come, but I knew at some point there would be good, but you have to get there. And we don't want to get there. I keep going back to that because it's really, this is what holds people back. And I feel it and I understand it. We don't want to go there. It's very frightening to go there. Yeah.
In therapy, we talk about meaning making in grief, the ability to create purpose from loss. Your phrase, possibility and disappointment in our recent one-on-one call prior to this episode beautifully reflects this idea. Can you share what that means to you?
Everything is possible. Everything. And every terrible trauma even that happens to us, there is a gift or something that comes out of it. There are so many things that have actually come out of this terrible thing, but people do pass away. That's like, we don't want to believe that until it happens. But there were so many things I could not believe that I went on to do the things I went on to do. I would not have done them. I didn't know that my child would have gone to the college they went to. I don't know that the decisions I made on my own, I would have made with Bob. And there were some possibilities about my own life and about what I was going to do, how I was going to live my life, that there's so much that we can learn. And there are so many possibilities waiting for us if we're open to it, if we don't close off to it. That's really key, to not be so frightened and to not be so in that comfort zone of not wanting to move forward or just wanting that person back so much that we never grow. It's like a relationship that you want back that is off. That's what it is. Or a job that, maybe a different direction, they let somebody go or whatever, and you still want it back. That's what it is. You still want it back because that feels so much better than saying, you know what's possible now because of this. It's like hanging on to, your closet is full of stuff. Get rid of the stuff because there's possibility. There's always possibility. And we're afraid to let go of the stuff. maybe we'll fit into those jeans again or whatever. Or maybe that guy or gal will come back to us. Or maybe that career, maybe that job, they'll beg us to come back. Instead of us saying, you know what, that chapter is closed, and it's really sad that it's closed. It really is. However, oh my gosh, what is possible for me now? And we don't know it. As we're going through the grief, we don't know that. We don't know this at all. And we don't even know if it's possible.
And we don't even want to, right? We don't even want to see any of the beauty in where our life can take us because we're incapable in that moment. And I want to normalize that. We are talking about trying to see the beauty and the possibility in disappointments and grief and loss, but it's okay not to put that pressure on yourself to have to see it in the moment. It's knowing that at a certain point, you're going to start to realize, oh, wow, this has led me to so many things, to connections, to opportunities, to self-development that I may have not been able to access prior to this. So we don't want to obviously put that pressure to say at the moment a horrific loss happens, you should be there. No, it's just normalizing that at certain times in your journey, you're going to start to see that there is that possibility and beauty and disappointment and the loss that we all experience in different ways.
And it's very incremental. The learning and the growing is very incremental. They're like little baby steps. And you don't even really notice that you're evolving just by every day getting up and you made it. That's amazing. That's huge. You're doing it, you're evolving, but you don't see it. So it's tiny, tiny little steps, one after the next. Like a little baby learning to walk. It's just a little bit, and then you fall down and you get up again. And then one day, like anything you learn one day, you're like, oh, I learned how to do that. And in this case, I learned how to be on my own. Everybody has some thing. For me, that was my thing. Maybe other people, that's not their issue. Maybe their issue is they're perfectly independent. And I was very independent. I worked every day, very independent person, and thought, but we were very close. We had a very close connection, and I really relied on him. And that was my thing of how do I do this alone, the mechanics, but mentally, how do I do this without this, this person that was always steadying me? And then you realize way later, I can be steadying me without losing any of the feelings and the amazing, wonderful things you were together. But you learn that, wow, I can actually I may not like to do it all on my own, but I can.
Mm-hmm. That's so powerful.
Incredible. That's very empowering. That is
absolutely
very empowering. Yeah.
Sheila, there's a mindset shift between asking, why did this happen to me versus why did this happen for me? And it goes on what we were just talking about. But what led you to this mindset and how did it change your experience of grief?
Yeah. Well, I think that while I was going through all of this and writing those letters, like I said, I was becoming a little bit more spiritual in that I started to listen to, on YouTube, and I started to do, read a little bit more about, affirmations and Louise Hay and all these people that I never really delved into before. I'm very intuitive, but I was never that much into that world. And little by little, I found myself with my cup of coffee in the morning or whenever I had quiet time. That's what I would do also. Had a very hard time reading. I couldn't, I was nervous. I couldn't read. I could write, but I couldn't read. I couldn't do that concentration. But I could listen to books and I could listen and watch YouTube videos. And at first I was like, what are they saying? And then I'm like, oh, if you just subtle, meditate, which I couldn't do. So it was like I was going back to school. And so I was learning that things happen for you. I would never have believed that. I would have never have bought into that. But I was part of my healing journeys. I had to turn to somebody. I didn't have family. I had several friends, but it was up to me. And I was trying to be strong for my kid. And so I started to turn to something spiritual. And that's where I started to learn about, oh, things happen for you, not to you. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe there's a gift in this. How could there be a gift in this? This is terrible. And I just, every day I learned one more thing, and to this day, every day, I'm just a student, and trying to learn and, raise my consciousness and be enlightened so that I can handle difficult situations. And that's what got me through actually most of it. It wasn't really a book someone handed me. It was just listening to gentle conversation or gentle videos, with affirmations. And I was just I was actually learning how to change my thought process.
And it is a process, isn't it? It's gentle and slow, and and everyone's journey is going to be different and unique to their experience. So I love that you've been able to share that with us. Thank you.
Yeah, that was very helpful for me. I don't know that I think a lot of people, that I know that wouldn't be. I think I was okay with not having instant, I feel good. Maybe it's because my kid was 15 and that wasn't instant. And so as I was taking my time each day with that, maybe that's what helped me take my time with me. So we were both learning at the same time, but different things. And maybe that taught me to be patient, that I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to understand it. I'm like, oh, I don't understand that concept. Okay, let me listen to it again. Let me find somebody else who explains it better. And I did, because it calmed me down, actually. It gave me something to do with my day. Yeah.
What you described there is this patience and compassion that we have to learn how to give ourselves in this process, because if we're putting pressure on ourselves or denying ourselves emotions or the time that it takes, because sometimes time is what is needed and no one can give you anything else. And it is learning how to gently be patient and kind to oneself and the journey that then allows exactly what you've just described come to fruition, right?
Yeah, it's really a gift. I mean, it's especially in today's world where everything is so fast. People they don't even want to read a book. They just want, the quick snapshots. So being patient is actually very difficult. And I kind of like things really quickly. I like to, I
Me
don't like
too.
it, right? And so if something is too long, I'm like, so it's really not easy. It's just not easy. But I found a sort of a habit or a new pattern I was forming. I would get my coffee, let's say it was the weekend or I didn't have to run to work, whatever it was. I had my coffee and I would listen to something and I would get my book out. I would journal. So I began a new little ritual for myself. Like some people go to the gym. That's what I would do. And it was so relaxing to me and calming. And I didn't share it with anybody because people I knew would have been like, oh boy, she's gone. But I needed that. It would be like going to a retreat or something, but I did it in my living room. I was comfortable. I would listen. I would take notes. I'd write down quotes. I would say, oh, who's that person speaking? I understand. I finally understand what they're saying. It was very, very helpful for me, but it was very long. That was, I think, part of the 6 years. It wasn't just writing. It was all of it. Because I don't know what I would have done. I don't know what I would have turned to. I needed to, I knew that I had somewhere deep down strength and I had to find it. I think that's what it is. I had to access it and I didn't know how. So every day I was like, well, you know what? Yeah, you got through today. And yeah, it is hard. I acknowledged it. That's really important. I acknowledged how difficult it was, or something really great happened. That was great too. And that actually helped too. So I also started to believe in celebrating wins as part of it. Little tiny wins. That's another thing I found, that people always want something big to celebrate. But no, little tiny wins. I cooked something for dinner. I went to the grocery and I didn't really want to. I got out of bed. whatever it was. I helped my kids study for whatever it was. And then little by little, that pattern, you gain confidence. So like anything, I gained confidence. And so I went on to the next thing. And when Sydney finished high school, was ready for college, I was actually sort of guiding back to Chicago because I just felt like that was correct. And Sydney ended up going to college in Chicago. So everything I did, the next step on the ladder, I was ready for, but it was very slow. And I used to tell myself, you start school and jump to college. But you don't question it because you have to go to school. And every day you go, and then after that year you go and you graduate. You don't think about that it's slow. That's what you have to do that. But for ourselves, we don't think about it. And it's like being back. I was in first grade again. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, we have to give ourselves that slack. I also think people don't think they'll get there. I think they're afraid they won't get there. So give it to me fast. But if you get it too fast, you actually don't learn. The learning is in the journey. The learning isn't in the result.
Absolutely. And everyone who knows me in my professional work and personal knows that, it is about the journey and taking it. As much as I hate it, and hand on heart, people know that about me, I want to get to the resolution. I want to get to the outcome, and I will work my butt off to get there. But if we do that, we miss things and we fall, and the challenges are so much greater than if we were to actually just take a breath and slow down and actually enjoy the process. So yes, I love that you've identified that for us. Sheila, many people feel guilty about moving forward after a loss, like healing maybe means that you're forgetting. How did you reconcile grief with personal growth?
Well, the two can live together. I mean, I grieved this great loss, and at the same time, I celebrated my growth. The two live
parallel each other, it sounds like.
It doesn't mean you have to give. I don't know why people always think they have to give up something when they're. Now, sometimes you want to replace something with something else, but I don't know why, like probably every day, it's like 12 years now, every day I think about Bob. But that doesn't mean that I am not growing, and he'd be happy that I was growing. So the two things are they're both in their own lanes on the highway. I don't know why they can't be together. And there are times I'm really angry about certain things, like, why did you do that or whatever? That's okay too. It's all okay.
Yeah, you've described there an interconnected kind of experience of all different types of emotions, and there's no set path. And I think when you first lose someone and you're in the loss and still such a connectedness to the loss itself, of course it's going to feel just impossible to think that there will be a time where it's not going to engulf you in all of that. And we're not saying that you ever stop missing them or grieving them. I don't think, while acceptance is definitely part of the grieving process, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden forgetfulness happens or that you don't make them part of your day or you don't get sad. There's definitely going to be, like you've just described, this interconnectedness of emotions and experiences that is so important, that we want to highlight that it's not so black and white. It's not, I've lost and now I'm moving on. They're both true at the same time going forward.
And I think also what I've seen, you looking back at me and then other people, that I think in the beginning when we have a loss like that, there's several different areas of grief really happening. Of course, you're sad that the person is gone. And maybe this person had an illness like Bob did or something quicker, whatever it is, you're devastated at that loss. That's one. And then I think also, depending on your personality and who you are and what you want, there's also this fear and this grief for yourself. And I think it gets mixed up a little bit in the grief for the person, because a lot of the times we feel this grief, but really, I'm just very honest about it. Really what it is I am scared. Not how could you leave me? None of that, but I'm just scared. So that's not grief. And it gets a little tangled up. And there are two separate things. And I've seen it a lot where that's not grief. You're upset that you have to do this alone. That's not grief. That's grief for yourself. Or that's thinking you can't do it. Grief for a person is I miss them. They were amazing. They did all these things. We were connected. We had fun, whatever those things are. But these other things that get in the way, that's problematic for me because that's not grief. That's like, you're just frightened. That's separate issue. And I think I would actually talk to myself about that. I do a lot of that. Like, Sheila, you're not like, wait a minute, you're scared. That's what that is. You don't want to, even things like, so Bob always cooks and he went to the store. He loved the grocery. I get going to the grocery. So I don't like being out late at night, like on my own. I don't like the dark. I'm just one of those weird things. Anyway, with him, it's great. So when I was on my own, I would have to come home from work. And if I didn't plan like to go to the grocery store on the weekend or whatever, which I finally figured it out, I would go at night. And it was terrifying for me. It's so bizarre. It's such a simple thing. It was terrifying for me. Terrifying. I hated going. I didn't want to park. I wasn't good driving. You name it, I didn't like it. But I did it. And it was like, that's not grief. That's being scared because you don't have a skill that you have to learn. And I think a lot of the times, not to be harsh about it, I know I come off a little energized, but I think people get this confused because that's not grief. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you, like I mentioned just now, distinguish that for people because when we identify that there are emotions and naming those emotions is so important for us to ascertain what our need is. If there is fear about something that we don't have skills in, well, naturally, that's going to give you guidance on what you might need to be able to not feel scared. Scared or fear. Emotions are our check engine light. They are going to tell us what it is that we need. And if we're able to name them, and sure, if it's associated with the grief, it's one thing, right? But if it's associated with problem solving or learning a skill or getting a need met, if we're able to identify that, it is so empowering that you actually have an ability to move through that and not feel so helpless in thinking that it's all wrapped up in grief and you're not going to be able to move through it immediately. I love that you've identified that for us today.
And I think a lot of people are, how do I put it? They're more reluctant than me. I'm very self-aware. I like being self-aware. It doesn't bother me to be self-aware. It doesn't bother me to be like, oh, that's what it is. It doesn't bother me. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not embarrassed by it or like caught. I'm not like nobody goes to jail over, figuring it out. But a lot of people, I think they're embarrassed or they feel bad that that's what they're feeling bad about and not grief. Not that they're not feeling grief. I don't mean it that way. But I think they're uncomfortable that could be it. Like, oh, yeah, you're right. I just don't want to eat alone. Oh, that's not grief.
That's
not
fear.
Really. That's fear. That's like a skill. Like I didn't want to drive. So, okay, that's a skill I need to work on. That's a skill. So I find that to be actually huge with people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that and allowing us to actually connect and see the differentiation between what's one and what's the other. You became an empowerment coach after your loss. How did you define empowerment in the context of grief and healing?
Yes. And it took me a while to get to empowerment, although that's what I was all about. I just couldn't figure out the wording. I've always tried to help people feel good about themselves, always. When I was a manager and I had a group of people under me, the best part of that position was helping people, nurturing people, making them feel good. I didn't realize at the time that I was empowering. I didn't realize that's what it was. And so in terms of grief and empowerment, To me, looking back again, as I was going through it, I didn't even use the word empowerment, right? But I realized, oh my God, I'm feeling strong. I can get through a day. I have power. Like I actually have power. And then I learned that we create the life we have. That blew my mind. That like we actually have control over that. That just blew me away. And the feeling of empowerment, it's like saying to somebody, you can. You don't know that you can, but I know you can, because I know that you have power, even though you don't know it yet. And you may not have it the same way I have it, and it may come out differently. That's okay. But we all are very powerful. We are like powerful creators of our life, and we could rewrite our life. And once I realized that, that was like everything just falls into place. Because without that, it's like you almost feel like you have no hope. You almost feel like you have no hope, and you're just a piece of driftwood, or somebody's making decisions for you. But once you realize that you can control your life and you could rewrite it, okay, and there are things that are going to happen in this world that aren't very nice, but you can still inside rise above certain things and still rewrite certain things. You are not, you are your own prisoner, really, or not. So I think
absolutely,
understanding that, and people, if they could realize that, oh wow, I actually have power somewhere deep down, under the grief and under the sadness and under I don't think I'm going to make it. I think what it is they don't know that they have the power. Again, it's like the parent telling the child, you're great, you're good. When we're adults, we don't have that. We have to be that parent to say, no, you got it. You're good. You have this strength. You're talented. You have these skills. You have to find yourself again, whatever that is for you. So I hope that answered that question.
Of course, thank you. Grief can sometimes feel endless, and people might feel stuck in their pain. What would you say to someone listening who may be going through their own struggle, that feel that they can't move forward?
Yeah, I think part of it is, number one, you have to be very kind to yourself and not beat yourself up. That's number one. And not feel, because that just wastes time, actually. That's just stuff that gets in the way. Oh, I feel bad. Oh, that's just cleared away. That's just stuff that makes you, not get to it. All right. And so be kind. You have to be kind to yourself, and you have to give yourself a break, because this takes as long as it takes for everybody. But I feel also that you have to be ready and feel like you want to take a tiny baby step forward. I think that's a problem too, that people think they have to wake up tomorrow and be changed. And that is not correct in my world. That is not how it's done. It's just not. That's not how you get through school. That's not how it's done. So if a person can take one, and when I say little, I mean little step, like put clothes on. Don't just put your, leave your pajamas on all day. One little thing, and then celebrate it, and then say, wow, look at you. You did it. You did that. And even set one intention for the day. Because I learned also, for me anyway, that setting an intention, something weird happens to my brain when I set an intention. It's like I made a promise to myself. And if I set an intention that I'm going to have lunch, I'm going to make myself a sandwich and have lunch. That's like, I want to eat, but even that could be difficult for somebody grieving. But if you set the intention, it's like, oh, I set that intention. Okay, I'm going to do it. And then afterwards, praise yourself. Because I think when you praise yourself, just like the child who gets praised will do it again. That's how we have to treat ourselves. So somebody that can't move forward, like no one can move forward. We are all in the same boat. We are all together. This is a community, even without grief. Okay. So it's one tiny step, then you celebrate it. I don't care. I know somebody who celebrates wins by making pancakes for themselves. I know somebody who likes to take bubble bath. It's, you know, you have to say, it's not just a pat on the back. You have to actually say and celebrate yourself. And then after a while, what happens with any new pattern is a new pattern is formed. All of a sudden you realize, and you write it down, maybe after a week or every day you write down what that intention was that you did it. When you look back at that, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I was feeling horrible last week and I did it. And that promotes your internal inspiration. I believe that. Mm-hmm. And you start really small. I mean, really small.
And going from what you've just mentioned there, Sheila, one technique I recommend to my clients is dual processing, where we try and balance moments of grief with moments of re-engagement in life. And I think you started talking about this already, but did you find ways to honor your grief while you were also allowing yourself to experience joy again?
I think I honored it by writing. I think that was the main way I did it. It wasn't a big thing that I did. It's sort of very internal. It's sort of like being, thinking about it. It wasn't big. It was just there. I didn't have to make a big deal about it. It's just there. And I think what happened after a while was the balance tipped the other way, which is why I stopped writing. I was like, I'm actually feeling, what happened? I'm feeling good. What? I don't understand what happened. What happened? I'm driving to the hairdresser and I don't mind. I'm like, wait, I don't know what happened. It's sort of like, when did I pick up that skill? I don't remember when it happened, because like anything, it happens organically.
Yes.
And when it does, it's not that the grief goes away, but the scale goes the other way. And I think a lot of people might also feel guilty if they're not feeling grief every second of the day. That's actually ludicrous, because you don't have to prove that you loved you don't have to prove anything to anybody. Like, that's my world. You don't have to prove it. You don't have to prove, well, I'm going to, beat my head against the wall, to prove how much I miss you. That's like silly. Like, nobody cares. Nobody cares, frankly. It's very personal. You don't have to prove you don't have to prove your love to anybody.
And with emotions I describe to majority of my clients in my work, they're like a wave. They're not supposed to be up here forever. They increase and they get intense and they come back down. And you might have multiple waves of emotions, of different emotions that you're going to be feeling moment to moment. So when there is the emotion of grief, it might hit you like a ton of bricks and you might feel like you're rolling around in it. And then all of a sudden it goes because you're feeling another emotion. It might be agitation because someone cut you off in the traffic, or it might be joy because someone made you laugh or did something kind to you. And then the grief hits again. So there's this change of emotions that we want to normalize for individuals. It is actually impossible to be in one emotion for a prolonged period of time. And we're talking about emotions separately. We're not talking about like a mental illness. We're just talking about the experience of emotions as they're come and go through our human existence and experiences of the day. So we want to normalize that. It's supposed to be changing and moving, and that is absolutely okay. That does not take away, like you mentioned, Sheila, from the love that you had for the person, or how serious that it has impacted you, or that you're moving through grief too quickly. It's allowing the process of emotions and letting them ebb and flow, while also making room for grief in your life, wherever that might be. And it might be momentary, where it's seconds, where other times it might take the whole day, and that is going to be unique to your journey and your experience of grief.
Yeah. I know that I remember that I wrote down at one point, feeling happy, let's say you watch a movie or watch something that makes you laugh, or a friend or whatever, that doesn't diminish your grief. But people's minds are really interesting that way, that it must mean that I don't care about the person. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that like you're human and you're allowed to laugh. Laughing doesn't mean that like you're saying, can't cry the next minute. And you don't need to cry. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to do it. You can be happy all the time. If that's what you want to be, that's fine. That has nothing to do with the fact that you love somebody and they're gone. Nothing to do with it at all.
Both right? Can be true at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Sheila, you've written empowerment journals and your memoir, Party of One. Many therapists recommend journaling as a form of processing emotions, and you've already talked a lot about your writing letters in support of your healing. For those who might struggle with knowing what to write, what are some prompts or reflection exercises you found most helpful, or you might even promote to some of your clients in your coaching?
Yeah. I always suggest several things. I suggest that people write down what I call a success list, just a fancy way of saying every tiny, medium, big win you've ever had. And when you start writing it, you don't really think about it because you want it to be big, but I mean every single win, 20 or more, easy to do. You just keep writing them. When I was 8, I had, when I was 10, or when I got that job, or I finally figured out how to make a steak without setting off the alarm in my oven. That's me. Or, I mean, every single win, got the promotion, didn't get the job, but feel good every single win. When you write that down, not type, write it in, write it, then read it out loud. Very important. And when you read it out loud, I'm telling you, you're going to be like, wow, that's me? Like, wait a minute. I have a lot of successes, and that shows that you have power. You can do it. You have strength. People that don't think they can, I'm telling you, there's a million things. You got your kid, they passed the test. Your friend, you helped your friend. Anything at all is a win. People think it has to be like, I didn't get the Academy Award, so I didn't get a win. That's not it. So that's a very, very important and very helpful writing that I have people do. I also have people sometimes write their talents and their skills. I call it what you bring to the party. Because what you bring to the party is not what anybody else brings to the party. Maybe you're a patient person. Besides your actual skills that you have, maybe you're patient. Maybe you're good at building something. Maybe you're good at listening. Maybe you're motivated. Maybe you're the one who inspires the crowd. Maybe you're the one who always cooks up the cookies. Everything, write those down. That's different than your success list. So these things help show us that we're like worthy humans, and that we're smart, and that we're capable, whether we've had a grief or not, actually. And there's another one that I would suggest. I'm actually writing another book, and it's at the end of the book, but I'm going to say what it is because I love this so much. It's called Because I Said Yes. Oh. And every opportunity you've taken because I said yes. Yeah.
That's powerful. Oh,
right? It's unbelievable what comes out of it. So all of these things I think can help people manage or balance those bad feelings, the sad feelings, the scary feelings, and then all the things in the world and all of that. But all of these things, they really do help balance. And of course, goes without saying, but I'll say it, you must write down in the morning and at night 5 things you're grateful for. You write them down in the morning. I don't care. I woke up, and you say it you write the same thing every day is okay. Every day I write, I love my coffee. Every single day. It doesn't have to be new. And at night you write, now you have something to write about. I'm really grateful. I did what I said. I set an intention and I did it. I'm so happy and grateful I went for that walk. I'm so happy and grateful I called a friend. 5 things. That's doable because people don't know how to do it. All these things are very empowering. They're very nurturing. And it's kind of like nothing can get you when you have that, because that's personal. That's your mind. Nobody can get in there, and it's time to build ourselves up. I'm just all about that, building ourselves up, nurturing ourselves, because there's enough to tear us down. Believe me. If we let it will happen. We can let it, it will happen. It will absolutely happen. So we have to believe that we can create our lives.
Yeah. And of course, we are just giving skills to, and suggestions for people to try. And some people are going to be able to do it very, very easily, and others might struggle. And if you're struggling, please know that you don't have to walk this healing journey on your own. There are so many, as we say in many of our episodes, there are so many clinicians of all walks of life that are going to be able to, or people or support systems that are going to be able to help you navigate these journeys and be able to help apply some of the skills and strategies we share with our community. So, Sheila, you mentioned that you've got the 2 books and one is on the way. What can readers expect from either book if they were interested in exploring them further?
The ones I've written, and So I actually have something called my Badass Gratitude Journal. It's actually a gratitude journal. It has 52 prompts. A person can just answer the prompts, and it also has 10 points. I call it a manifesto. It's sort of like, it starts with, I'm grateful for me. It has to start with you and then work out to the world. You have to be grateful for you, for where you've been, for your journey, for where you're going.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's easy to do. A lot of people don't like to journal, but if you don't know what to do, it's written for you and you just answer it if you want. If I also have my Badass Journal that is also, it's an empowerment and self-love journal. This is the first one I did. Again, it's prompts. You just answer the prompts. One of them is like, what will I say yes to today? What will I say no to today? Very empowering.
That's powerful.
Yeah,
yes.
Very powerful.
Even just having that as an option that you can ask yourself every single day or every other day is beautiful.
Yeah. And I just opened it up. I absolutely love this about myself. What a great, right. Very simple. They're not hard. Very simple. It's not, I do things simply, very casually. I sort of have a casual, easy going away about me because this is what I like. And then of course we have the Party of One, which isn't, there aren't prompts, but really it might be helpful for people. Maybe, maybe not. On one side is my little, a story, a vignette, a memory. Some are funny. Yeah. It's like when I was I said, oh, my allowed to do that? See, even I said that. And on the other side is a reflection, what I learned. Maybe I learned to be patient. Maybe I learned it's okay to have a funny memory, So it's just to help people realize it's okay. We all know, we understand, and it's not like preaching. It's not about preaching. You have to feel good. It's not about that. It's about giving yourself space. In fact, there are 4 sections in this, and it is, honor yourself, believe in yourself, be yourself, and find yourself. So, it's not about, telling you you're supposed to be this or anything. It's about, take your time. It's about when you're ready, you'll be ready. But here's somebody that's gone through it, and maybe it will be helpful. So that's why I wrote that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. And of course, all of the links to your books and bits and pieces will be in the description below for our community to be able to access. For those listening, Sheila, who may be struggling with loss, what message of hope or encouragement would you like to share with them in our episode today?
Well, I want you to believe in yourself And I want you to believe that you are more powerful than you can imagine, and that you can rewrite and be, well, you just have to think it, say it, write it, claim it, be it, own it. And you will see, if you do that as often as possible, your world will change. It'll become magical.
Sheila, that even just, I can't hold back tears because hearing that, and I'm going to put that as like a little snippet in my phone that I can replay to myself over and over and over again. And I encourage our community to do that because sometimes we just need someone's voice when our voice is incapable of telling us that. And what you've just mentioned there, Sheila, hit really, really deep in my heart because as you were saying it, a part of me believed it. And that is such a powerful and beautiful thing that you were able to share with us today. And thank you so very much.
Well, thank you. This is lovely. Thank you.
To finish up, Sheila, where can people find your work or connect with you?
All right. They can connect with me through my website. That's liveoutloudcoaching.com. And on Instagram, it's at liveoutloudcoach. And my books are on Amazon and some are on Barnes & Noble. Yeah.
Beautiful. And like I mentioned, all of the links to Sheila will be in our description below. Thank you very much for your time on the Self Reflections podcast and sharing your reflections with us, Sheila.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely. Thank you.
For our community, thank you for tuning into the Self Reflections podcast. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below to share your thoughts. Until next time, take care and keep reflecting.